Yeah. Well, Elizabeth, thank you so much. I've been really excited to talk with you, especially after our first phone call. Your enthusiasm for what you do and, your sense of passion, I think speaks volumes. And if you're okay starting off, I would love for you to introduce yourself.
Absolutely. So I'm Elizabeth Meyer Karansky. I'm a funeral director. I'm a thanatologist, a death doula, an author. I think that's about it.
It's a long
And
list
anything
already.
in this world.
Yeah. How did that all start? I mean, I know you have a laundry list of, expertise and titles there. But your main squeeze right now, correct me if I'm wrong, is in the funeral
Farewelling.
business.
My main squeeze is farewelling,
Awesome.
and that's kind of every other step have brought me to this point. So I'm a co-founder of a company called Farewelling, and our whole idea is basically to celebrate a beautiful life beautifully. And I started in this field after my dad passed away, which was over 15 years ago. And I planned his funeral, which was, I think, fantastic, but it was hard to do. No one else was having anything special. Everyone your choice was basically, do you want flowers? Yes or no? Do you want red or white roses? Um, I threw a huge party, and at the quote unquote after party, people came up to me and said, I don't really know how to say this, but I had a really good time at your dad's funeral. If God forbid something were to happen to me, would you plan mine? And so my mission from the beginning has always been to celebrate life, and not in the way that it kind of became a term at a certain point was, oh, I want a celebration of life. What does that actually mean? Everyone says they don't want the traditional funeral, they want the celebration, but then they don't really have the tools to do it. For the most part, you're planning it quite quickly. And people, there's a reason you hire a wedding planner is because you've never done it before. And by the way, for weddings, you have months and months and months to plan often.
Mm.
For funerals, maybe you have a week max. Obviously, memorial services are different. And so, fortunately, I teamed up with an amazing co founder, Karen, and we now have Farewelling.
That's amazing, and I love the angle, and it's so innovative at the same time. Like it's so true. Every funeral is just black and white. It's just like it's just the same thing over and over, and I think it's so important to celebrate it. And I think that kind of dumbs down to our conversation of why maybe you and me, or what I'm taking from you, is that you're so comfortable talking about it, and you see it as a celebration. Do you tribute your, I don't know if enthusiasm is the right word, but your ability just to talk about it comfortably is such a morbid topic that I think societally and most people, at least in our neck of the woods, seem to kind of avoid. So, what was it that's made you so comfortable talking about it slash just being in this field more or less? Was it your personal experience, but at some point something had to switch? No.
So I think a couple of things happened. I think one is I absolutely adored my dad, and he died when I was 21. And I think, and you can speak to this as well, is when you lose someone that matters so much to you, you almost feel invincible, like nothing else can hurt you as much. Now, I will caveat that by saying, as a parent, that then, flips it over and
Hmm.
you feel completely different. But there's almost an invincibility for a moment that nothing hurts because you've already had that jab. Um, and I think my way of healing, in retrospect, I can say this, but my way of healing was to help others. And it became such a mission and such a calling that any sort of personal pain was pushed to the wayside because of the, I don't want to say pleasure, but honor that it gave me to help others through that situation. And I always said, if I saw one widow or one grieving family member smile for a second, it was worth it to me. I felt like I did a good job because that's what we're doing at funerals. We're honoring those people. And there should be a smile. There should be a feeling of, this was a life well lived. And I'm not saying that grief isn't sad, it's overwhelmingly painful. But the funeral should allow you to feel like you gave them a good send off.
Hmm. And your angle of how your business works, and I know you're, I want to say even calling at this point, does that force you to get closer to people than perhaps more than other people in your position in the more traditional manner?
Yeah, so I've kind of in this industry, I've always been closer to the clients, family members that we work with than others. I also think if you look at me, my stature helps. Is I'm not intimidating.
I only see
Um,
half of you right now, but I
yeah,
know you
well,
mentioned
there's not much more to it.
it. Fair.
Um, so I think I've always been empathetic, um, and obviously when we're trying to plan really personalized funerals, we want to get to know that person. And the only way to do it is to pry out of their loved ones. Who were they really? What did they like? And by the way, every single person is unique. Every person has their likes and even as important, their dislikes, right? For me, I love flowers. I think they're amazing. I absolutely hate lilies. They remind me of a funeral home. So if someone were to go in and say, "Oh, she loves flowers," and the funeral director would say, "Okay, like great, here are lilies." It takes that person who knows me to say, "No, no, 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 no."
Yeah.
I think those nuances are what we always look for at farewelling. We really want to get to know the person, and we want to get to know, we want to take it the next step. Oh, for example, my partner absolutely loves rosé, and everyone's like, "Oh, well, then we should serve rosé at your funeral." And she says, "No, no, no, I want a rosé fountain
Oh, no
instead of a
way.
chocolate fountain." And I think that so symbolizes our company, is that it's not just do one little thing, it's go overboard and
Yeah.
really get the feel of it. Know that Karen is one of these people that does go overboard. Um, and so I think that you really get the stories of the people. When you talk about making sure they're buried in a special outfit, what does that say? What story does it tell? What do we've had people who are buried in their wedding dresses or their tuxedos, or by the way, their pajama pants, because that's what they've been living in. um, but whatever it is, it tells so much about that person. And I just think it's so important to listen and
And,
to
that, and
ask
that's the and
questions
that's
and
the
to
premise
be.
of it. I guess you just listen to these people. Is that it's such a unique way, and it's such an honorable way of remembering people, because especially in funerals, it is such a way. I never really thought about it deeply, honestly, until I learned about what you do, and the aspect of sending someone off. Obviously, the funeral isn't the last memory of someone. You usually latch on to something, some kind of other living experience, but it is such an odd send off, and I feel like that really is synonymous to the way we absorb death regularly, in the way that we're just saying it's okay to have a funeral that's so sad and just so structured and the same way every single time, that it adds a flair and a level of acceptance and celebration, like you said, to for someone's life. And I want to ask you, I'm kind of going back and forth right now because I want to dig into a little bit more about how you operate with farewell. But you said at some point, this you're you latched on to helping other people, and that kind of pushed aside maybe what you were going through. Is that what you were saying? So did this deflect from your grieving process? If you don't mind me getting a little personal on your
No,
own story.
personal is what it's all about. I think, yeah. So when I wanted to, right after my dad's funeral, I went to my mom and I said, "This is my calling. This, the silver lining of dad's death was that I was meant to be a funeral director." And she was like, "Absolutely not. No." Um, and her take was that I was just kind of becoming fixated and that I would never grow from this horrific event. And in retrospect, it was the opposite. It was that I had been taught you only fear that which you don't know. And so I wanted to know everything, hence the every degree I can get in this field.
Yeah.
Um, without obviously going through the process, I'm not there. But I think that it was definitely for me a way of grieving. In a way, it was a different time. We're talking 15 years ago. There weren't podcasts. There was barely social media around this at all. Um, And in the same way that you're searching by hearing stories from others, if you don't mind my saying so, is that, that's how you learn. That's what I was doing, is I kind of went, boots to the ground, because that was the only place there was.
So learning through other people, in a sense.
Learning through other people, learning to honor. I think that was really important to me. It's always been that you honor that person. And as you said, the cookie cutter funeral just didn't seem fair to me.
Hmm.
My dad was one of these larger than life characters. And so to then minimize his life and you just say, okay, here's your box, bye, didn't work. And I think, by the way, that's the way we're going with many other areas of society. We have birth doulas, now we have death doulas. In the same way, I often compare the funeral industry to the wedding industry. It used to be, as my partner will tell you, that you went to the church, the temple, etc. You had your service, and then you went downstairs for champagne and cake.
Hmm.
And then as people started intermarrying, and one religion didn't work, well, they would take their choice and pick around what traditions they wanted to keep, which they wanted to add to, how they wanted to personalize it. And that's where we are with funerals, is that generation that intermarried and that did weddings their own way is a generation that's starting to pass away.
Wow.
And they're the ones who want their funeral personalized.
Huh. I'm not from a business standpoint. It sounds like a pretty tremendous opportunity, but it's beyond that. So I'm trying to gather this question. In regards to, I guess the ideology that you have so many different backgrounds beyond a funeral director, and you've studied so much. And reverting back to the question that I asked of, does it force you to, not force you, but does it happen that you get closer to these people? Does it turn into anything beyond just setting up their funeral in regards to offering your services as a death doula? Because I've spoke with several death doulas on this, and it was another area that I wasn't familiar with until I started speaking to people in your field. I'm curious as to if you can disclose. I guess it's different from person to person. What is the conversation with these people like? Is there a general rule of thumb of helping these people heal?
So I think the important thing is that there isn't necessarily a guidebook or a
Mm,
playbook.
mm,
It's that everybody has their own personal story, and listening to their story and listening to what works for them and what they wanted, right? And it depends whether someone's planning for themselves, obviously, is a different conversation than if it's a family planning for someone else. It depends whether the person's still living or not,
mm.
planning in advance versus what we say as at need. And also what the service is going to be. Are we going to have a funeral, or is it going to be a memorial? Or, by the way, what we're working on at Farewelling and seeing a lot of is virtual services,
Oh, interesting.
whether completely virtual or we do hybrid as well, which is that certain family members will be at the funeral home or wherever they choose to do it. But for the sake of safety, maybe it's only 5 people gather at the funeral home or the location, and the rest of invites are via the webcam.
What's your take on that? How's that? Since you've been there? What does that
So I
feel
am
like?
actually a really big fan of it.
Interesting.
And it's interesting to me because obviously when COVID hit, I was such a big believer in the hug, right? And the
Mm,
physical gathering and making sure you're not alone and you're not isolating. It was something I worried about in COVID, was people being alone. And I think we have, as a society, I mean, look at us now. We have
yeah.
come to adjust to working with screens and feeling a real connection. And we at Farewelling worked really hard to make sure that our services are not just logging into a Zoom, but working to make sure that we seamlessly can integrate, videos and photos, integrate live speeches versus pre-recorded speeches. And that's one of the things that, technology actually can be okay. Is
Mm,
I spoke at I did my dad's eulogy, and it was so hard for me to get up there. And I'm sure, I don't remember it, but I'm sure I choked. How great would it be if I could sit in my own room by myself on my own time and pre-record and get out those words that I want to say? And the other reason I'm a really big fan of it is, it was always a struggle with funerals to get everyone there. And I don't know about you, but even personally, there would be times that, you're under a clock. You have to have this funeral in a certain period of time in many situations. And at the same time, we're a busy nomadic society.
Mm,
It's not the easiest thing for everyone to jump on a plane for an hour service. Do
yeah,
you try to make it work? Of course you do. However, oftentimes you simply can't. We're busy people. And so to have this option, I think is so fabulous. And to make sure that so many people who want to attend can.
that's brilliant. Once again, it's another angle I never considered. The opportunity to actually say what you want to say and kind of more thoughtfully put it together
Mhm.
is so much more meaningful in a way as well. So you said hybrid. Have you done a hybrid where it's essentially like a full funeral, but you
Absolutely.
also just like live stream it or something of the sort?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've done completely virtual, um, which tend to be more memorial services. And then we've done hybrid where the family's at the funeral home or the church and the visitors are watching.
What does this do on you? And you've been around. How many years have you been doing this?
Over a decade.
Over a decade. I mean, does it numb you in a sense, or do you feel like being a part of so many other people's deaths? Um, I don't want to say desensitizes you, but what
I'm
does it
not
do to your
jaded.
psyche?
I think the second you get jaded, you shouldn't be in this field.
100% agreed. That's well said. Okay.
Um, I'm not. I think whatever it is, when I say it's a calling, um, I think
Sorry,
that's
just the lighting over here.
no, that's
Apologies.
okay. I think it's a calling, and I believe every person is unique. Every situation is unique, and I'm known for getting goosebumps and tearing up
Ah, it's
often.
cute. Okay. Then
And I just
you're
think,
still in
well,
the prime spot then if you're feeling that. That's amazing.
I don't know what it is. I think I'm look for better for others, worse for me. But
Right.
I think it's just if this is in you, it's in you. If you're empathetic, you can't help it.
Mm.
And I also think there's different stages of life. I'm a new mom, and so things hit me differently than they did before.
Yeah, that's one thing with my own personal experience with my mother. I can't once you have a kid. I don't have kids,
Mhm.
but once I keep hearing that over and over again. It only makes sense. Obviously, is once you have a kid, you look at life differently, and then you by looking at life differently, therefore you're going to look at death differently. And and you said the opposite. You felt invincible when you lost your dad, but once you had children, what does that do? It's just more. Is it more
Game changer.
worry?
So I think so. Both my husband and I lost a parent, and it's an interesting conversation because we're both constantly thinking about it. And
Mm.
I think it's actually an area that hasn't been studied, and I'd like to do some more of it. Is parenting without a parent
Oh,
and what
interesting.
that does. But I will say it makes death real all over again. So even if I had been the slightest bit jaded, you realize that on the other end is that family. And I think what's always hit me, and maybe it was because I had lost a parent, I had sat on the other side of the arrangement table, is that a death is sad, but how many people are affected by that? And I may leave the office and go home, but these people forever are in pain. And, here we are grieving, and I'm still grieving 15 years later. I think that to me I never forget that. I never forget that that day someone's life was turned upside down and their life will forever be changed and they will forever have pain.
How do you see yourself grieving now, 15 years later? Like if you were to
Yeah, so I
compare,
think
or
it's different. I think everyone's personal. My daughter is named directly after my father,
oh, nice.
which it isn't common. Maybe you take the first letter or something. I actually wanted to, and my thinking was, is if I can not replace, but have a little bit of joy and reassociate the name with something positive. That works for me. I think I often in parenting kind of hear his voice coming through. I acknowledge it. I will take a minute. We try to have items from my husband's mom around for her, talk to her about both these people. Um, and I think the important thing is, again, conversations, acknowledging, and doing whatever you need to do. And I think, look, being in the field enables me to be on the front end of thinking. It allows me to dive into these topics. Um, and what's really special to me is I get so many phone calls from friends of mine who are going through it,
Mm.
who say, I just need to talk and I don't know who else to call. And
That's remarkable. Isn't that remarkable that you don't know who else to call? I'm sure some like plenty of people in your circle have, not everyone obviously, but close
many,
friends and family or people that are going through it too. But I don't know what it is about, like, for example, say I want to talk about it. I couldn't go to my sister for whatever reason. I had to go to someone outside of my immediate family. To me, seems so contradicting. You think you'd go to the people that are feeling it with you, but I feel like someone told me pointed out to me it's a sense of not wanting to hurt them in a way by talking about it or by bringing it up. Do you see it the same way?
yeah, so absolutely. I think in thanatology, we were studying that, the elders want to talk about their own demise. They want to plan. And it's the children who say, no, 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 don't worry, mom. You don't have to do this. You don't have to have this conversation. And it's children who are scared, and it's easier not to have those conversations. But, I talk to my mom about death all the time. I wrote an article for Farewelling about it. It was, I talked to my mom about death, and, both of us are still here because I think that's sort of the strange idea is that if you talk about death, somehow you're going to drop dead. But if you don't, it'll be fine. You'll live forever.
Yeah, it makes no sense. If anything, it's gonna hurt. It's gonna hurt when the time comes. What do you guys talk? I mean, obviously you said death, but where do you? How do you start? How do
So
you start that
every
conversation?
Yeah, so every little thing, like I know my mom wants a red lacquer casket.
Oh, fancy.
Yeah. However, I also know where I'm getting that red lacquer casket. I am prepared in a way that, by the way, I wouldn't be if I didn't know that's what she wanted. I also, and this was actually quite painful for me, was when COVID started. My mother, who's the most organized human being, called me over to her apartment and had Ziploc bags with the children and grandchildren's names on them. And she was like, Lizzie, this is where everyone's stuff is in case something happens to me.
Oh
This is
wow.
at this place. She has a book of passwords. She's like, here's the passwords if you have to get into this account. And it was jewelry that she had taken the time to go through and allocate to each of us.
Oh no
And
way.
and I was and again, I'm a crier. I'm tearing because this is real.
Mm.
And I looked at her, I was like, Mom, I don't want to do this. And she was like, you taught me to do this. You're doing it. And it was kind of the first time it hit home was how hard it is when it's the time. It would have been a lot easier. And these conversations were easier when she's well.
Right.
Now, my mom's totally fine. Thank God. But I think the most important thing what I realized is how important it is to have these conversations before you have to have these conversations.
Yeah, it seems to make it when you do have those conversations, it makes it tangible before it happens, of course, which is so easy to avoid, but you're just kind of it's just you're building it up. And I think you hit the nail on the head how it's some kind of you talk about it, some kind of odd manifestation of something that happened. But it's at the end of the day, it sounds very simplistic, which I think it is. It's inevitable. So the more we push anything off, whether it's emotional feelings or this or that, you're only building it up, in my opinion. So I'm a big advocator as you are to talk about it, and you're talking about it in such a specific way with your mother that I don't do it in the same way that you do, but the conversation does come up, and once obviously death hits you personally, I think that it kind of forces you to talk about it. But there's just a sense of fear for something that's so inevitable that I think having the discussion. It's going to suck in the moment, but it's only preparing you. And it doesn't have to be negative, because I think when you talk about it, people immediately equate it to just sadness. But that sadness can then grow into gratefulness for what you have now, and then from there, it's just ever expanding. I think is just enriching your life from a perspective standpoint.
No, I think that's really well said. Is I absolutely wake up every morning and I am the most bubbly, happy person you'll ever meet. And it's because I'm grateful every single day. I get up, I'm up, I'm excited to be vertical. And I know that my family's the same thing. And I think it's truly a gift that your family can give to you is to plan. You know, one of my regrets is I never was able to talk to my dad. And so I planned this, what I think was a fantastic funeral. I don't know if it's what he would have wanted. I have no idea. He may have had issues with everything I did. And some of those decisions actually, I won't say haunt me, but I still think about them as what he really wanted, A or B.
Mm.
Whereas I know from my mom, and even my grandmother, who is this adorable, old Italian lady on her deathbed, said she wanted to be cremated. And she had a headstone, everything prepared. Thank God she had that one last sentence, or, at the end is, if you don't hear it, you just don't know.
Yeah, it's a sense of closure in a way. I think when it's done the way they want, if you have that opportunity to do it in the way that they would want, because one thing about death is it's another perspective that amongst the years, it's so simplistic, but it's so final for the person that dies, but it's so continual for the people still living. So it's almost easier, not easier, because I don't know what the hell happens next, but it almost seems easier for the person that dies, because they're done, and we're left with the residual. And it sounds a very selfish way for the people mourning, but I think that's the reality of it. So, in a sense, having it together in the way you're saying it, of planning someone's funeral once they pass, it's kind of I've never experienced farewell, and I'm whenever those days come, I'll be more than happy to use you. But seems like a sense of closure for the people that are planning the funeral, and knowing, excuse me, knowing that this is the way they wanted it, and it
Yeah, I
seems
mean,
like
we
a peaceful
we have
transition.
checklists for people to fill out in advance, and
A checklist.
yeah. So figure out what you do and you don't want. And the idea is that if God forbid something were to happen to you, your family or loved ones would know what you want. We also have something called a farewelling five, which are sort of what are the five things that are really important to you. And
Huh.
then we also ask why. And I think that's sort of what really sets us apart is the why, because it's so telling. And if you're going to plan this funeral, I want to know why does it matter that we're having a green funeral? Is it because you recycled every single morning of your life? And so the idea of, your final act not being green is horrible to you? Do you know what I mean? I think you get so much of these stories, and to know what's important it's such a gift. It's such a gift you can give to someone.
That is such before it was not split second before you kept continuing explaining the why. You asked the why. That is the value proposition, if you will, in regards to what you're doing, and that's just as a simple, detailed addition to that checklist you're talking about, that shows you adding that why almost answers your why. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you actually give a shit, and that's a question that you could have easily just left out. It could just be a checkbox. This is what you want. Cool. Move on. So I commend you for that.
Thank you.
That's kind of what that's honestly that's what it's all about. I think, in not even just this field, just I think asking the why internally for yourself. You don't have to share it with anyone else, is so important. Asking why people do X, Y, and Z is so important, and the fact that you're doing it to help others is just it's telling. So
Thank
I
you.
truly think that's amazing. And the checklist you're saying, that's something just it's just a preparation down the line for people
So
just
it's
to personally
something if
have.
you want to prepare for yourself, or if, by the way, with someone who may not be doing well, it's questions that are palpable and that are easy enough to answer.
Mm.
I think what we provide is a different voice in this field. Again, I've obviously done a lot in the industry, and I think there's a couple of voices that are out there. There's the kind of preparation from a legal or financial standpoint, which is the get your bleep in order.
Yeah,
Um,
sorry, I cursed earlier. My bad.
oh, get your shit in order.
There you go.
And then there's, the funeral director. There tends to be that voice of the kind of goth, oh, look at what we're doing.
Yeah.
And we're neither of those. We're kind of your best friend, the funeral director,
Yeah.
who really wants to help you get through this. And we're not scary. My partner's even pretty, like super pretty and lovely and warm and, compassionate. And there's nothing about us that's intimidating. It's just an honest, let's get through this together. Well, let's have a laugh.
Mm,
Let's be friends and get through this painful thing together.
mm.
And I think that's what's most important is we at all times we try to give people what they need. So one of the first things we did when COVID hit was number one, we had a free hotline for anyone to call. And number two, we built out our memorial sites. And that was something that was really important to me personally, and obviously to Karen and our team, was that people had a place to gather. And when COVID was really, you know, so omnipotent and so prevalent, people couldn't gather at all. And they couldn't even get together necessarily for a virtual funeral. And so these memorial sites became an amazing place for gathering. And when you say kind of how am I taking this after it's such a disruption to what we know in the industry, these are so beautiful to me. This was always something that was important because we live in a world where kind of the social media and the tangible matters. And we have so many photos. And so these memorial sites are beautiful. You pick your own specific background, you design it so personally. And then you have words from all around, from every walk of life. And what's so truly, truly magnificent to me is that everyone can read. If you publish it and make it public, um, everyone can read the words that are said. And so I always felt like the best part about a funeral was you got to know someone from all different aspects of their life. I could work next to someone every day, but only know them really in the work environment.
Mm.
And here I am hearing stories from their childhood, from their family. And what's so great about these memorial sites is they're there for people to read. Photos can easily be uploaded.
Oh my god.
And what you get is like a real feeling of that person.
That it gave me the chills because immediately I want to make one for my dad, and
Yes,
it's so
please
mind blowing.
do.
It's such a genius idea, and it's been in front of us for the longest time at this point. And it's a living organism, and it's always a place to go back to it. Like you said, and back to the idea of digital, virtual funerals. It's just a place anyone. It's easily accessible, and the different angles from hearing someone's story is so interesting to me because I think about that with my dad about I knew my dad from the perspective of a son, which is
Mhm,
much different than the perspective of a best friend or work
mhm.
and et cetera, et cetera. So I think that is so brilliant that you can kind of connect everyone and see these different angles of the person you love that you may have never known and just always a place you can go back to, right? And the screen in your hand right in front of you. That's absolutely brilliant. And that's on your
Let's
website?
create one.
Is it on your website?
Right.
How is that
It's
logistically
right on our
moved?
website. Click myfarewelling.com and you'll see memorial right there. I mean, we
So it's
make it,
hosted on your website. Everything is
it's
hosted.
hosted on our website. And it's something that I truly, one of my greatest accomplishments. And we're so proud of it.
You should be.
Um,
That's absolutely brilliant. And I love that once again, just I want to keep throwing you bones because which you already clearly should know and you do know, but the fact it goes back to that adding the why to that checklist and you offer when I went to your website, you offer they're grief resources and it's not just plugging in your business per se. It's not so much like come to us for X, Y, and Z, but you're truly offering help for people. And I think that is the most powerful aspect. That's why, I reached out to you guys because you're promoting other grief podcasts, for instance. And it was just it just seems so unconditional and it comes from a place of experience and love. So, um, I think what you're doing is so innovative and disruptive, as you said, in such a brilliant way, and it's such a breath of fresh air in
Thanks.
such a a lack of oxygen type topic.
Yeah, I
So,
just look,
it,
it's tough, right? This is
yeah,
a tough field. And I think I was advising a bunch of companies that were trying to take the business from the funeral homes and whatnot. Like, no, this isn't about that. This is about organizing everyone and giving people who are going through the process every resource to help them and to show them what's available and to be a guide. And I'm not there. In no way are we trying to take business from anyone.
right.
And I think that's something that was really important to us, is to make sure that we're helping. We are truly helping.
Yeah, and you mentioned on
Um,
the phone when we first spoke about how you were even mentioning other local funeral homes and whatnot. So it kind of speaks to what you're saying now. How exactly have you kind of mentioned
right.
and
So we noticed that people that would call in would or write into us, reach out to us for help, would say, "I don't even know where to start. I'm in so and so location, and I don't even know how to find a funeral home." And I think, again, back to our nomadic society, is we tend not to live where our parents did or where we grew up. Maybe our parents have moved to a different home, whatever it is. And many people find themselves literally searching for a funeral home at the time that they need one, and taking out their phones and doing what you do is Google funeral home my location.
yeah.
Um, and unfortunately, it's quite hard to judge a place that's going to be so significant by simply a website or a name. There's more that goes into it. And so, one of the things we've done is take, I think at this point we have maybe almost 100, but in 75 or so locations, and we've written up guides to funeral homes in those spaces. And we found funeral homes that we feel very comfortable suggesting to people. And they run the gamut of fancy, corporate owned, or something much more, independently owned, family owned and operated. We love those. And the family, one of the reasons we did this was that, some family owned and operated locations may not have the money to be at the top of that SEO, and maybe they're not the ones that you see first on Google,
Mm.
but maybe that is the right place for you. And so, in an attempt to kind of level the playing field a little bit and give people a guide, and they're not ranked, they're not, we don't say go here in any way. It's just, here's a kind of personalized list of places that we feel comfortable that you should look into these.
Yeah, I mean, you operate in a your. It seems like your theme is just bespoke, and like kind of what you're saying is with the other funeral locations, is you're not ranking them. It's that's bespoke in its own way too. Maybe one's right for you and one's right for the other. Jesus, I want to like virtually hug you. You're so like everything you're doing is just so. It just seems so genuine, and it's really coming from a place of truly wanting to help people. So I think that's amazing, and I want to before we kind of wrap it up. I think what's next for farewell, and maybe also blend in, maybe if you have anything else to announce or mention, you want to plug in your business, but what geographically, like, are you, I remember we discussed this, but where are you exactly? I know you're in the East Coast
So
now.
we're in New York. However, we've worked with funeral homes all around the country. We've done funerals because of virtual. I mean, we're working on a few, I don't think any right now are in New York.
Hmm.
So we've done West Coast. We have done East Coast. We've done New York. We're in the South right now. And by the way, one of the funerals is one family member's on the West Coast, one's in Florida. I mean, it's
There you go.
and that's our world now. So we're based in New York, but we are all over. I lived in LA for a long time, so we do a lot in LA. Yeah.
Plug in the websites and
So
any
it's myfarewelling.com. We're also on social media. You can find us on Instagram at myfarewelling. Also, yeah, Facebook, et cetera, et cetera. We have a podcast, and it's everything you need to find is at myfarewelling.com. And there are very exciting things to come. I'm not sure I'm allowed to speak of them yet, so I'm going to keep my mouth shut.
That's fair. I tried slipping it out of you, but we'll have to do it the right way.
Yeah, I was bad, and you almost got it.
I mean, not that I thought there was any top secret information, but
It's exciting.
Elizabeth,
Let's
you
put it that
are a
way.
true, you're a true gem. I really am grateful that we've connected. And you guys responded to me when I reached out. I'm looking forward to, seeing what you guys have up next. And if there's any opportunity for me to continually try to help you guys or support you guys anyway, I think you'll be fine just without me. But if I can do anything at all, I'd be happy
Thank
to.
you.
And I'm really supportive of what you're doing, and I love it.
Thank you. Well, thank you for having us. We will create a memorial site for your dad. I'd be honored to do that with you.
Like you have no, I would, my family, my circle would absolutely love that. And I want to apologize in advance for some of the stories you might read. So,
Oh,
but
come on, that's exciting.
no, I'm just kidding. I'm so interested. That is a great way for me to, because honestly, after I got off the phone with you, I texted my uncle. I was like, we got to go get a beer because I need to hear some stories. I want to hear that those
Yeah.
different sides of my dad that I don't know, even the good, the bad, and the ugly. You know what I mean? We all have
Yeah.
our angles. So I want to know how similar we are. I want to know so many things that I would have not been exposed to unless my dad told me personally as a grown man. So
Yeah.
I think it's a tremendous opportunity. I'm definitely going to take advantage of that. I would love to chat more with you about,
I,
or just go on your website.
you know where to find me,
Yeah.
and I'm always happy to chat. And I think that you and I are on the same quest. You can't pick up the phone and call the person you want to call. So you
Mm.
try to get information in any other way. And I think if memorial sites and just opening the conversation and asking it's a big step.
Yeah, and I know we were supposed to end this, but I saw this one photo of my dad. I may have mentioned in a prior episode, a photo I never saw, and I thought that I've seen everything. I thought I saw the photos, saw the videos, and I'm seeing this memorial website and just hearing stories from other people as an opportunity to create new memories. In a way, it's weird because when I saw that photo, even though I was in it with him, I had that experience, but it was so new. I don't remember seeing that I was like, it felt like a new memory, and I thought the new memories were over.
That's
So I think
amazing.
I think hearing those stories and the opportunity you're giving people on these memorial websites are just so can open a lot of doors, and that's just one door that I saw. So
That's amazing. Thank you for saying that, because it's so important. And
mhm.
I hadn't thought about that way of new memories.
Yeah, even though it's not obviously, just it feels like a
Yeah.
new memory, and especially
Yeah.
you're what 15 years since you lost your
Yeah.
father, and
Yeah.
so it's 20 years for me. So we're kind of in the same boat there. That it feels like we've had everything we can. So it's refreshing when you hear new stories, and I think that's truly important as to what you're doing with the memorial websites. But
Thank you.
Elizabeth, you're a busy woman. Thank you so much for being on here
Thank
again, and I'll be happy to. I would love to stay in touch, and like I said, if there's anything I can
I'd
do for
love to
you.
stay in touch, and thank you again for your time. This was great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Dead Talks. Please do not forget to hit the subscribe button and also the notification bell. That'll give you updates as to when we post a new video, more episodes, and more content in general. We are streaming on all the major podcast platforms, including Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Pandora, and all that. And also find us on Instagram at Dead Talks Podcast or www.deadtalks.net. Thank you so much.